All right, let's just jump right in. The science of consciousness. Well, to put it nicely, it's a total mess. It's not just a debate, it's a full-on battlefield of competing ideas, kind of like a scientific Wild West. But what if there's one single clue, one thing that almost everyone's overlooked, that could finally bring some order to all this chaos? That's what we're going to dig into.
This quote right here, it just nails the problem. The whole field is in what you might call a paradigm crisis. The old maps don't work anymore, and all the new theories popping up, well, they're not even speaking the same language. They're operating orthogonally, which is a fancy way of saying they're not even playing the same sport on the same field. It makes it almost impossible to figure out who's right.
So, yeah, think about it. We're staring at a massive puzzle. There are over 200 competing theories, 200, and each one starts from a different place, uses different tools. It's like being a detective with 200 witnesses to a crime and none of their stories match up, not even a little. So where do you even begin to find the truth?
Okay, so to really get a feel for this chaos, let's line up a few of the usual suspects. We're going to take a quick look at some of the leading theories, just to see how wildly different they really are.
First up, we've got recurrent processing theory, or RPT for short. Now, this theory is all about keeping things local. It says that for you to have that raw, subjective experience of seeing the color red, you don't need to alert the whole brain. All it takes is a little conversation, some feedback loops happening right there in the visual part of your brain. It's basically local gossip.
And right there with it is Integrated Information Theory, or IIT. It's also on Team Local, at least when it comes to that raw feeling. The idea here is that consciousness is this structure that's so integrated you can't break it down any further without destroying it. And it points to this super busy, dense area in the back of the brain, an area they sometimes call the posterior hot zone. But then, in comes Global Neural Workspace Theory, and it just flips the whole script. It says, nope. Consciousness isn't some quiet local chat. It's the headline news. It's what happens when information goes viral in the brain, when it gets broadcast across a huge brain-wide network. That's what lets you actually think about it, talk about it, and act on it. So you can see the problem, right? You've got local feeling versus global announcement. They seem like total opposites.
So we have these warring factions. But what if they're not actually wrong? What if this is like that old story about the blind men and the elephant? You know, where everyone's touching a different part and describing the whole animal based on just the trunk or the tail? What if there's one single fundamental idea that secretly connects them all?
This is the clue. This one word, recurrency, it sounds kind of simple, but this might just be the secret key, the common thread that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
So, what on earth is recurrency? Well, honestly, it's a pretty straightforward idea. It's all about feedback loops. Information in your brain doesn't just travel on a one-way street. It loops back on itself. A signal gets sent forward, it gets processed, and then another signal gets sent back to tweak the original one. It's a constant conversation. And this simple concept might just be the thing that unites all those battling theories.
Okay, and this is where it gets really, really cool. Because the big idea here isn't just that feedback loops exist. It's that the scale of the loop is everything. The size of these feedback loops could be what explains all the different things we call consciousness.
Let me show you how this works. Think of it like a set of nesting dolls. You start at the tiniest level, feedback loops inside a single neuron. That's cellular recurrency. And it just gets you the basic state of being awake. The lights are on. Then you zoom out a bit to local recurrency, loops between nearby brain areas. That is where you get the raw subjective feeling, what it's like to see red. Then you zoom out one more time to global recurrency, loops that span the whole brain. And that's what lets you say, hey, I see red. See? Each level builds on the one before it. And bam! Look at how everything just snaps into place. Suddenly, nobody was wrong. This framework doesn't throw out the old theories, it organizes them. It says, hey, RPT and IIT, you are totally right about local loops creating our raw experience. And GNWT, you nailed it with global loops allowing us to access and report that experience. They weren't actually competing, they were just describing different rungs on the exact same ladder. And in doing all this new framework might just solve one of the oldest, most bitter fights in the whole field. I'm talking about the heavyweight title match, experience versus access. Is real consciousness the private feeling of seeing red, or is it the public ability to say you see red? For decades, you basically had to pick a side. But with this recurrency framework, it's not a fight anymore. It's a continuum. I love how the source material puts it. The standoff dissolves into a graded cascade.
All that means is, as the feedback loops get bigger and deeper, that raw, private experience just smoothly and naturally becomes something we can report on. It's not one or the other. It's a spectrum.
Okay, so this all sounds like a really neat, tidy solution for the philosophers and scientists, but so what? Why should we care? Well, it turns out the real-world stakes are actually huge. I mean, just look at it from an evolutionary angle. Recurrency isn't just a clever design choice. It's a flat-out necessity. Sure, you could theoretically build a brain that only sends signals one way, but it would be an absolute monster. It'd have to be impractically huge and would just guzzle energy. So evolution found a smarter way, the recurrent network. It's efficient, it's flexible, and it lets an animal actually adapt to a world that's always changing.
And the implications are just profound. It resolves old debates, sure. It even suggests that our very sense of self might be grounded in the constant feedback between our brain and our body. But here's the really critical part. It could have a massive impact on medicine. By focusing on these recurrent pathways, we might find better ways to diagnose and maybe even treat disorders of consciousness, helping people in comas or vegetative states. And this framework is so robust it can even drill down a level deeper to explain the quality of an experience. It uses something called lateral recurrency, which is basically sideways chatter within a specialized brain area. This is what might explain why red feels more similar to orange than it does to green, because the neurons processing red and orange are having a much more intense conversation with each other.
So all this leaves us with one final, pretty mind-bending question. If consciousness, at its very core, depends on the physical reality of feedback loops in a biological brain, what does that mean for AI? Today's models are unbelievably powerful, but they run on hardware that's fundamentally feed-forward, or one-way. They only simulate recurrence in their software. So does this mean there's a fundamental gap, a hard barrier between their kind of processing and genuine consciousness? That's the question this unified framework forces us all to confront.